the topic that I'm talking about today really it ties into the covenant, but I'll kind of have to show you that more in the end. But the quote is from 2 Corinthians 12:4. It says, "He was caught up in paradise and heard inexpressible words, which it is not lawful for a man to utter." So why was he caught up, and when was he caught up, and what was the purpose of it all? And it's the same purpose for us receiving the covenant code, the same worship or same reason for many special people that he called. And we'll start to take a look at some of those people and then tie it all together kind of at the end here. So start off by looking at someone that we know well, which is Peter. The very first time, now Peter and the other disciples had already kind of started semi follow him. They part-time. They were at his baptism. They'd gone up to that wedding together and they saw him turn water into wine, but they still weren't following him full time. And when when there was many people crowding around Jesus, and he wanted to use their fishing boat to go out into the water a little bit, because of course, I don't know if you ever, when you're at a lake, you can hear somebody even across the lake speaking or yelling, because the water acts as a very good, almost a microphone. Plus, at a little bit of distance, they could see him better. But he never commanded Peter to give him a boat. Like he at different times would command the use of a donkey or something. The Lord has the use of it. He actually said, pray if you'll, take me out in your boat. Like he very politely asked him if he would take him out there. So, and they'd been fishing all night. They hadn't caught anything. But beginning at Luke 5:7-9, it says, so they signaled to this was Peter in the one boat with his partner, and then the other guys in the other boat. And as this boat started to overflow with fish, then they signaled to their partners on the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees, and whether a translation either depart from me or go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man. For he and his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. So as a fairly common theme, you'll see this falling at the knees, this almost having no strength, this and this sudden awareness of how unworthy you are to be in the presence of the Lord, because of the sudden awareness of who He really is and how pure and how it just that He is God. You're in the presence of divinity, and you realize that you might have had little hints before, and you saw things like they heard the voice at his baptism and stuff, but in seeing this um, Christ sitting right beside him and this miracle happening right there. I mean, can I borrow your boat for a little while? Oh, here, let me repay you. Here's more fish than you've ever seen, probably your whole fishing career. I'm going to give it to you in the next 5 minutes. Just cast it over there. He pretty handsomely rewarded these fishermen for using their boat for a little bit to give a sermon. But it was actually astonishing to these experienced fishermen. And we know at the end of just before Jesus ascended, Peter had really shamed himself and had denied even knowing Jesus. And yet Peter was so zealous for Jesus and was always the first to to declare him as Christ, and to even want to defend him at the end when Jesus rebuked him. So he went back to fishing. Him and his partners, to talk them into, Christ is gone now, and we're here on our own, and so let's go fishing again. And when he's when they went fishing, they didn't catch anything either, and they saw the Lord on the shore already making a fire and cooking them up fish. But it was John that recognized that it was the Lord. It says, then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and jumped into the sea. I mean, how often does Peter jump into the sea when he sees Jesus? He jumped into the sea when he saw him walk on the waters and, pray that I could do that, walk to you. And Jesus said, come. But it's this awareness, this of the divinity, because remember that in John 21:7, the Lord has been crucified and he's risen. So he's seeing the risen Christ, and he jumps into the water to get to shore first. Didn't want to wait for the boat to be there, but that's kind of a bookend of when Jesus called him to begin with, and it was after this incident of the boat that they began to follow him full time, right after that miraculous catch, and all the way to this time when they have another miraculous catch, but now they're going to become fishers of men. But it's a realization, this special realization that Peter will never forget, or his companions, of when he first realized that he was in the presence of the Lord and how ashamed he felt, how of himself, and how unworthy he felt. But at the same time, how beautiful he saw the Lord. Isaiah, then I said, woe is me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips, dwelling among a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. That feeling, same feeling, overwhelmed Isaiah when he realized that he said, woe is me, because I'm ruined. What am I doing here? I must have snuck in the back door because they I'm such just feeling your sin, feeling your unworthiness, and at the same time being called by the Lord. And they took a coal from the altar and touched Isaiah's lips and said, of course, from the altar was where the sacrifice was, and said, now you've been made clean. So this uncleanliness that you feel, this unworthiness that you feel, but the Lord immediately starts to take that feeling away from you. He has to show it to you first, how unworthy you are to even be in his presence, so that he can show you that he's the one that seeks the relationship with you, and he wants this for you. He wants this, this what he is to be what you are. He wants to elevate you. He wants to elevate us. The whole purpose of this is to elevate. I mean, remember when well, we'll talk about Paul in a minute. So anyway, Exodus 3:6 with Moses, the Lord speaking from the burning bush. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham. Remember, Moses' father was Levi, one of the tribe members. It's from that tribe of Levi, which is the tribe of Jacob, from Isaac, from Abraham. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. He went there, he saw the burning bush. He's not afraid. He's hearing this voice. But as soon as he begins to hear that this is the God of the patriarchs, which they're not, um, they're still living according to God, because he will raise them all, in day. But even Moses, so we have Isaiah, Moses, where the first reaction is this trying to hide from the presence of God, just afraid to look even. And it's that necessary feeling of unworthiness that God uses to such advantage in calling his people. Just having them know first of how holy he is, how beautiful he is, and that it's really him. Um, Job, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself. I repent in dust and ashes. That was actually my baptismal quote. My text for my baptism, and it was for the same reason. I studied the Bible. I told you guys before about my doubts and my prayer and my answer to prayer, and I felt like I read a book before, but now I feel like I actually know who you are, and actually, and it makes me feel even, like 10 times more uh, necessary for me to be baptized because of my uncleanliness, and so, um, but anyway, this is Job, where where he it says he's the most righteous man in the whole village. He's praised for his sons. He prays for people at the gate. He's done nothing wrong. He's set before Satan to be a test to prove that his love is real, to prove that God's love is real, that Job's love for him is not based on just the gifts that God has given him. So, but he, through this whole trial, comes out of this and says, now my eyes have seen that. Therefore, I despise myself. Like, but it's not a permanent despising. It's like, wow, I thought I was doing good. I thought I was right up there, just one notch below God. But now I see this that's so far above, so beautiful, so clean, and it's had my side the whole time. And wants this relationship with me. Like, yes, I can see the difference between me and him, but the amazing thing is he wants a relationship with me. And I'm not even deserving to even be in it. I don't know how he got in this position, but it's through him, and I want that, and I want what's inside of him, inside of me. And then when we looked inside the tabernacle, it was how beautiful on the inside it was with the cherubim and with the materials and with the gold and just the care that's put into that design. And we see the beauty that's veiled from the outside. And, we want to spend time there, especially with the one, the anointed one. We got a chance to be invited to spend time and have communion with that anointed uh, high priest in that beautiful place. But yeah, and that was the whole point of it. Um, this is um, the husband and wife, when it was Judges 13:22, when they saw the angel of the Lord, we are going to die, he said to his wife, for we have seen God. Went out and stood on the mouth of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? And that's when Elijah had heard when the Lord passed, and he said his name and the attributes of the Lord, and when Elijah desired to see or to hear him, and he told Elijah, it's not in the lightning, it's not in the thunder, it's in the still quiet voice. Anyway, but again, this is a great prophet of God. It says he wrapped his face in a cloak, like you have this thing where you want to look, you want to be there, but just this overwhelming feeling where you're just not, that you don't deserve to be there. I'll tell you more about that near the end. But Abraham, the patriarch, then Abraham answered, now that I have ventured to speak to the Lord, though I am but dust and ashes, fully recognizing I have this opportunity to speak to the Lord. You're inviting me to speak, but I know who I am. I know what I am. Genesis 32:30. So Jacob named the place Peniel, saying, indeed, I have seen God face to face, and yet my life was spared. So you know how reverent that place was to Jacob. Jesus commented about the centurion. The centurion answered, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. It's that type of recognition where Jesus said, will I find faith like that in Israel when I return? And all he's doing is acknowledging that he knows that his home, even though the centurion would have had a nice home, he had 100 men working for him, and he would have been had been assigned a good home, but not worthy enough for the Lord of Lords and Kings of Kings to even enter into. Matthew 14:3, 1-3. This is when Peter was in the boat, and when they saw Jesus walking towards them, they weren't sure if it was a spirit or what it was, and then he calmed them down and said, "It is I." And when Peter got excited, seeing the Lord walking towards me, asked him to, let him come towards him, and Jesus said, "Come." And then he lost his faith and started to sink, and Jesus, saved him. So it says, immediately when Jesus reached out his hand and took hold of Peter, "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when it says they, that means Jesus and Peter, when they had climbed it back into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, thou art the Son of God." So in seeing this, they were terrified earlier of this vision, but then seeing him rescue Peter and bring him back into the boat, and it just this this person that dwells with him day to day really is the Son of God. They were convicted of it right then, if they hadn't been before. Matthew 17, 5-7. While Peter was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell what? They fell face down in terror. Then Jesus came over and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Do not be afraid." So notice they're shown this incredible difference between them and the Son of God and the voice of God, and they're shown how they really don't belong in that picture in terms of worthiness. But at the same time, it's Jesus that says, "Get up, don't be afraid. It's me." Because he wants them, he wants to he's the one that seeks the relationship, but they need to know. That's because you get very familiar, very comfortable in relationships, and they need to keep in mind who they have this relationship with, who it really is. And like I said, you can see a lot of people in church get very comfortable with the Word of God, very comfortable with everything about themselves and their ranking in the ministry, and who's higher and who's lower, and whatever, and not even realize that them, like everybody else, and what an honor it is that they're even able to be part of this ministry, to even be able to be found worthy to speak about God. They make it like turn the other way around, like they're doing God a favor, and he owes them for it, as opposed to that, that they're being blessed, you know, by the Lord of Lords to be part of this, and then Jesus is giving them that opportunity. You know, Exodus 20:19. And they said unto Moses, "Speak thou with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die." They were terrified when they saw the thundering and the lightning and the things going on the mountain, and they wanted someone to speak as their between them, which Moses did. 1 Samuel 6:19-21. So these things that apply to people also apply to all the things in the tabernacle, because those things in the tabernacle, the people, foretold exactly Christ. But God struck down some of the people of Bethshemesh because they looked inside the ark of the Lord. He struck down 70 men. 70 men were killed for looking into the ark. And the people mourned because the Lord had struck them with a great slaughter. The men of Bethshemesh asked, "Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? To whom should the ark go up from here?" So they sent messengers to the people of Kirath Jearim, saying, sorry, I'm just looking around so I can see. The Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up with you. They didn't even want to touch it. So because it was holy, it was set apart, by God, and it was stolen and mishandled and thought it was being a common thing. Just like when they mishandled Jesus and tried to, spit on him and all the things they did to him. This being holy means set apart by God for his purposes. We went through on this covenant code how the ark, represents Jesus, his earthly ministry and then later his return as King of Kings. So these things are to be taken seriously. They're not, and so the vessels of the ark and things like that were definitely, uh, holy to the Lord as well. We're going back now to Paul, who's the one that's given that vision. And we need a little bit of a background to kind of appreciate this a little bit more. Just check my times. So I got lots of time. So there's actually four letters that Paul wrote to the Corinthians. We get a copy of two of them. We get, the first and the second, but there's two in between. But Paul had established this church after about 18 months. It was a very thriving, successful church. And of course, at the same time, Paul's establishing churches all around there and spending months at each one and coming back and returning to them all. And they had a really good thing going at Corinth where they were to about a year earlier put together a fund that they would send back to Jerusalem. It'd be their first kind of offering, and they were doing very, very well, and they were going to, give this back to the church in Jerusalem. And so because Paul was away, quite a bit, oh, excuse me, quite a bit of the time, some people that were taking advantage of the whole spread of the gospel and the whole in Asia Minor, it was really catching fire. And so this group gave themselves credentials and gave credentials to each other, being not just apostles. Paul kind of mockingly calls them super apostles. So they want to establish churches there or take over churches there that they had nothing to do with founding. And so they weaved their way into the church in Corinth, and they started attacking Paul in his absence. They questioned his credibility as an apostle. They shamed him. They talked about his weakness, his infirmity of his eyesight. That how can he be apostle of God? He's imperfect. He's weak. He doesn't. He gets beat up, held up. All these things come along where he's not back here. He's supposed to be here in the spring, but he's not here because he's not being blessed by God. He's not. He's not. Just basically, he's not an apostle, and they really shamed him. And so Paul responded by letter, the one that we don't have, saying that they needed to repent. They needed to reject these false apostles, and they needed that he actually had the authority to destroy them, the church, and that he didn't want to use that authority. He wanted to heal them and wanted them to repent. So he sent Titus to deliver this letter. And then once he was supposed to meet Titus um, right afterwards to get the report back. And depending on what report Titus gave, Paul was going to decide whether he would see him or not. Well, Paul got really troubled because he went to the place they're supposed to meet, and Titus wasn't there. He never did show up. So Paul went ahead to the next place, thinking that he might be there, in the place that they were evangelizing, and he was happy to run into Titus there. He got the report back, and it was a mixed report. It was the majority of the church repents, and they want to be healed and to heal, but there's a very strong minority that has not repented. So Paul decided not to go there at that time, to go um, somewhere else for 3 months, and that's when he wrote this Second Corinthians. And so it's kind of a hard letter to understand, because there's some parts praise, some parts not. But so when he's talking here, and I want to give that background so I can explain it. But so they're bragging about their credentials. They're bragging about we're here. He's not here. We're we're he has no credentials. They talked about different visions and things they had. He said, "I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. I knew a man in Christ above sort of a little bit over 14 years ago. Whether in the body I cannot tell, or whether out of the body I cannot tell. God knows. Such a one was caught up in the third heaven, to the third heaven. And I knew such a man, whether in the body or other body I cannot tell, God knows, how that he was caught up in paradise, and heard unspeakable words, which is not lawful for a man to utter. So heard the most holy words in this third heaven. Now, what's the third heaven? Well, it's the first heaven is where the fowl is the sky, the atmosphere. The second heaven is further out in the universe, where the stars dwell, etc. And the third heaven is that very place where God, the Word of God, the Father, where they manifest themselves. It's their dwelling place. And Ellen White talked about a little portal out near Orion or whatever, but there's an actual place, which is the third heaven, where God dwells. And Paul was taken to that actual dwelling place of God, not the temple, the actual dwelling place of God. And it was 14 years. So you can kind of put the puzzle together, because what happened? Well, Paul was blinded, and when Jesus called him for 3 days, and then he had to make his way to be prayed over, and to be, to his most of his sight be restored, but not all of it. And then he went away and he studied, then he became the apostle of the Gentiles. So it was at that time when he probably spent 3 days without sight, and being led around and whatever. And somewhere at that point is when he had this vision. And it was that vision of seeing this beauty that he could never even, it was sealed. He wasn't even allowed to tell anybody, but he saw this beauty that he felt his unworthiness, his supreme unworthiness to be there. But at the same time, the beauty that he saw, and the words that he saw, and the words he heard, that stuck with him forever. So he always, he didn't just study about the Word of God. The Word of God was embodied in him. He let Christ live through him. That was his whole goal. Is that man is so beautiful. That Lord is the one that's calling me right now after all that I've done. I held the jackets of the people that stoned Stephen. I persecuted the disciples. I've done all this, but I've always loved God. I thought I was doing God a favor, but I wasn't. And I want that to dwell in me, that presence to dwell in me, and I want to dwell in that presence forever. So that's what took Paul through all of this persecutions and all. I mean, even Jesus said he's going to suffer many things, for my name. And it was that vision that God gave him of his unworthiness, and the beauty and power and of Jesus Christ. And so that's what he's preached the rest of his life, just Christ crucified and risen. and baptism and just the real essentials of the gospel and the love of God. And so he says, uh, after saying the unspeakable words, of such a one will I glory. So yet of myself I will not glory, but in my infirmity. So when he means that that man that was taken on this vision, that Paul that got this feel this joy of all the things he saw, but also the humility of not thinking he didn't, knowing that he didn't belong there. He can boast about that man because that man was done a very special favor by the Lord that not many people had ever been given that favor to be shown the third heaven. So he can boast in that man, but of himself, of his day-to-day life and walk, he's not going to be a fool and boast about that because he doesn't want to fall short. He don't do anything to mess up his eternity. So I shall not be a fool, for I will say the truth. But now I forbear, lest any man should think of me above that which he seeth me to be, or that he heareth of me. So I also don't want to tell you this. I've never mentioned this before, and I'm not going to tell you more details of it now, because I don't want anybody to see that me boasting in a way where I use that vision that the Lord gave me to elevate myself above everybody else. Yeah, I'm the one who's given the vision. You got to listen to me. He's sharing it to counter these false accusations by these really truly unworthy apostles that are trying to replace him. So, um, that's the first bit, and then we just got one more little bit on this chapter. It just says, "Unless I should be exalted above measure, like, don't exalt me more because I have this vision. Through the abundance of the revelation, there was given to me. Um, there's also given a thorn in the flesh." Now, remember when he talked about that, why he at that time spoke about that revelation about seeing the third heaven, is because these false super apostles all claim to have visions and all claim to have that was their prophetic proof that they were super apostles. Of course, none of those visions can be verified. There's just these guys talking and patting each other on the back, saying, "Yes, yes, he's a prophet," whatever. Paul never had to rely on any of that sort of stuff. But Paul said he was given a thorn in the flesh and the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice or three times, that it might depart from me. So there's two things: some sort of physical um, uh, uh, infliction, which we can assume is his eyes, that he prayed three times that then they'd be healed. But and then also a continual buffeting from Satan's messengers wherever Paul showed up. You're sure to see Satan's seed show up right behind him, or be right there where he is, because because Jesus really was living through him, and Satan really did know the effect of Paul. And you remember the account of the false the people are trying to cast out demons in the name of Jesus and in the name of Paul, because Paul was the go-to person for casting out demons. So these other guys, these 12 family members, were trying to make money off casting out demons, and they had a little bit of success, but then they went to that one that was called Legion, that super, super powerful, satanic force. And when they're trying to exercise him, uh, they said, "We exercise you in the name of Jesus, the Lord of Paul." And if you remember, the response is, "Jesus, I know. Paul, I've heard about. But who are you?" And then he just tore them apart, flung them against the wall. Those 12 men barely escaped with their life. So what I'm saying is that Paul actually had these credentials and actually had this abundance of revelations and was, and but he had this infirmity, some sort of physical infirmity, and he had the continual buffeting of Satan in his life, where we had to deal with that. So he says, and so the Lord answered when he prayed for, basically his sight or whatever. He said to me, "My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmity." So these other guys are boasting about all their credentials. Paul turns it right around here and says, "I'm going to brag about my infirmities. These things that you tell these other people make me weak, make me not fit. The miracles that I'm doing, because he's doing actually miracles in the churches of us, the ministry that I have is even more miraculous considering my infirmities, considering how many times I've been beat up, stoned, thrown in jail, considering how weak my eyes are, considering all these things that, and you want to know my credentials? The church that you're trying to take over is my credentials. I set up that church, and all those people, that was me. That's my credentials right there. And he goes through just, I'm using very plain language, obviously, but so I'll glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Because even though I'm one man, I've pretty much evangelized all of Asia Minor with the help of others, but I've been there for every one of these things. Paul wrote over half of the books in the Bible in the New Testament, like 13 of the 26 books or something like that. But so he did those things. So I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Well, how is he strong? Because the more dependent he is on the Lord, the more the Lord steps in for him. And so when he is weak, the Lord doesn't expect Paul to burden it all, doesn't expect Paul to carry all the load, just to keep marching ahead. And whatever comes along, the Lord will be there with him, and so wherever he's weak, the Lord will be strong. And so it's these infirmities that Paul boasts towards. So the only way he could come to that type of faith and that type of belief was that vision at the very beginning. That vision when he saw third heaven, when he saw the truth, when he was taken there and he saw the truth, and he wanted that truth, and he wanted to do nothing to ever mat up. Never. He wanted that beauty inside of him, and he wanted to be able to return that beauty for eternity. And so that was the motivation that would allow him to withstand anything else. It's just it's a weird thing because it's when you're talking about God, you're talking about Jesus and the purity. We're talking about things that are even beyond description, like Paul says, even impossible to describe. But it's just and so you can't help but feel unworthy. Like but because of that, and because it's Jesus is the one that says stand up or gives you that encouragement or whatever, that he's seeking this relationship, then it's even more incredible. It's more, and so that's who Paul boasts about, is Christ. He doesn't boast about himself. He hardly speaks about himself, other than just history. So, I got this little virus thing. Just get rid of that. Okay. So what do we, let's bring this all back together now. So what have we been doing, and what is our purpose, and what is, these are people that we just read about, that God called, Isaiah, Peter, Moses, and all the others we read about, that they had this experience, this the third heaven, this I'm not worthy, but this is beautiful, experience that carried them through their ministries, and they all had it. So, what's in the seventh generation of Revelations, what does it have to do with the covenant code, and what does it have to do with our calling? So, these would going to summarize in just a couple of slides what we've studied so far. Moses led them to Mount Sinai, where the Lord had first appeared to Moses before he sent Moses to rescue them. After twice ascending the mountain for periods of 40 days to meet with the Lord, so he's in that presence, that we're talking about, and receiving his instructions, Moses returned to the people with the codified law in his hand. This included the two tablets of the covenant and with the Ten Commandments that Keith talked about this morning that were written on both sides, engraved by the Lord himself on the stones. It also included the covenant code, or the book of the law, that was written by the hand of Moses for all that the Lord instructed Moses to record while on top of the mountain. And we paid special attention to the words that the Lord said. When the Lord said to Moses, write these words, for according to the tenor, which is pattern, of these words, I have made a covenant with you and with Israel. So Moses, you write this, because it's according to this pattern that I've made a covenant with you, so personally with Moses, and with the new nation of Israel. Most of all the original writings of the covenant code, so the thing that Moses began to record, pertain to the tabernacle pattern. Moses was warned 3 times not to deviate from this pattern, this tabernacle law. The tabernacle pattern is the blueprint of God's covenant and man's redemption through Jesus Christ. It says in Hebrews 8:5, this is why Moses was warned when he was about to build the tabernacle. See to it that you make it everything according to the pattern shown you on the mount. Why? Because it all pointed towards Christ. And if he had tried to um, change it in any way, then he would have robbed God and robbed Jesus of the glory of the prophetic foretelling of these things through the tabernacle. Under the instructions of the Lord, Moses then ceremonially entered the people into the covenant as the new nation of Israel. He sprinkled half their sacrificial blood on the altar and half on the people. Christ thus signified in the ceremony and in the pattern, his future fulfillment of the pattern and the place their redemption would be paid, which is at the altar or at the cross. So, uh, observing the covenant code, this is things we looked at too. For the seventh generation in Revelation, said there was given me a reed like a rod, and the angel stood saying, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and them that worship herein. Hebrews 8:5 says, the place where they serve is a copy and shadow of what is in heaven. This is why Moses was warned, which we just finished reading, see to it they make everything according to the pattern. Exodus 25:9, you must make the tabernacle and design all its furnishings according to the pattern I show you. Colossians 2:17, there are a shadow of the things to come, but the body that casts belongs to Christ. So we look at who else was called to measure the tabernacle. We had Ezekiel versus the call in Revelation. We've looked at this several times, but in both cases, the scroll of a book is given that's to be fully digested by the one that God's calling. And then, once it's fully digested and they understand it completely, then they're supposed to go out and evangelize, go speak to their lost and sleeping, brethren, and show them this incredible, things that you've been shown by the Lord. So it says in Revelation 10, our observation and understanding of the little book are to equip us to evangelize the world at the final time in the last call prior to Christ's return. As the first generation through the apostles evangelized the world in a single generation, the last generation has the same calling. And again, we just saw Revelation 11:1. So just gonna go through one more and then I'll kind of try and put it together. So we've seen this, we've measured it, we've seen the beauty of it all when we tie together the numbers and timelines, and it all fits together with how it foretold Adam to Enoch, the 10 generations, then to Abraham, then to David, then to our time, well, to Christ's time, and then to our time. It's incredible. It's never broken pattern, all according to the tabernacle. And that's how each of his people and each of these major events happen to the exact same plan. There's somebody that's a very respected professor that works on statistics, and he said if the same person was was could be demonstrated that 8 of the prophecies were one person only and one person only fulfilled, the odds of that happening were to uh, 1 out of a 1 with 17 zeros after it. So, just write 1 and then 17 zeros after it. So, I mean, finding 1 out of all those chances, if just 8 prophecies were fulfilled in one person. And he gave also an example of how big is that number? Well, if you took a quarter or a coin and you put it across the state of Texas, that pile would be 2 feet deep of quarters all across the state. And you'd have to walk in there somewhere and pull one coin out of it to say, yep, that's the same chance that, so it's a zero probability event, when you have that would 8 prophecies being fulfilled in one person. It doesn't even become a pattern without them. So we looked at these numbers and we saw the beauty. We saw, the first generation to Noah. We saw the time from Noah to the ministry of Jesus, from Adam all the way to the ministry of Jesus, and then from Adam all the way to our generation. And we saw the symmetry and this beauty. And then we saw how close we are to that pattern being fulfilled. So if we put all the time from Adam till today onto a 24-hour clock, we would be 16 seconds away from the clock striking midnight and all time being fulfilled. Not 16 minutes, 16 seconds. The last quarter of the last minute of prophecy of time. That's how close we are. So we've seen all these things, we've evidenced all these things. And we've looked at it together. And this is what Ezekiel was told. And what we're told. And remember, Ezekiel is measuring the temple. That's what he's doing. He's not showing a vision. He's showing a vision when the Lord leaves, and then when the Lord returns to his tabernacle. And Ezekiel is in the middle of Babylonian captivity, and the temple is destroyed at the time. But he's shown this vision of measuring the temple of the Lord. He said unto me, Son of man, the place of my throne, and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell in the midst of the children of Israel forever, and my holy name shall the house of Israel no more defile. Neither they or their kings, um, uh, they nor the kings by their whoredom, nor by the carcasses of their kings in their high places, and their setting of their threshold by my threshold, and their post by my posts, and the wall between me and them. They have even defiled my holy name by their abominations that they have committed. Wherefore I have consumed them in mine anger. Now let them put away their whoredom and the carcasses of their kings far from me, and I will dwell in the midst of them forever. Thou, son of man, show the Lord's house to the house of Israel. that they may be ashamed of their iniquities. And we've been talking about this whole time when people actually see the divinity, recognize in the presence of a real God. When how does Peter feel in the boat? How does Isaiah feel? How do all these people feel when they first realize they're in this presence and it's true? They feel ashamed. Just like it says here, show the house. And if they feel ashamed, that doesn't mean a permanent shame. That means just a recognition of the truth and what they walked away from, and why did they walk away from this, or what sort of gain did they walk away from this, and then that they may be ashamed of it, and then let them measure the pattern, show to them, and if they are ashamed, so only if they recognize and feel that that the beauty of it all is make them feel the shame, the glory of it all, that they walked away from this or didn't believe or whatever, you know, if they feel ashamed of all that they have done, then show them the form of the house and the fashion of it and the goings out thereof and the comings in thereof and all the forms thereof and all the ordinance thereof and all the laws thereof and write it in their sight that they may keep the whole form thereof and all the ordinance thereof and do them. This is the law of the house. Upon the top of the mountain, the whole limit thereof, round about shall be most holy, because this is the law of the house. So show them this, and if they're ashamed, then show them the beauty of it all, and the extent of it all covers everything now. So the whole holy land, the whole temple, everything as far as you can see, as far as you can touch, as far as you can look, is all under the same covenant, the same protection, the same purpose. So that's the whole reason why God called Peter and said, I'll build my church on this rock with meaning on Jesus, but also on the stone, Peter, that would be his first, his first head of the church. And so you see, it's the same thing. It's the same. This seeing the beauty, seeing the things in there. So when we are studying the covenant code, we're to look at that in the same way. The beauty of it, the truth of it, the awe of it all, and see how only a divine God could have these put in, you know, ahead of time. And then once we see that, and then we're not to be ashamed anymore of our iniquities. We're to be let the Lord live through us and go there and show our brethren with confidence and joy, show them, you know. So it's the purpose, it's the same purpose as when individuals are called, like Paul or whatever. And what does Paul see? He sees, the third heaven, but he sees the dwelling place of God. What does others see? The temple, the dwelling place of God. And let me just check my time one more time. And I only got a few minutes to tell you how this all kind of came about a little bit. And uh, so we just finished doing our series, and I was really proud of it, and all the stuff that's in there. And I saw a couple. The good news is, it's reached thousands of people in that week, more than we normally, reach, which means it's also reached people outside of our little group, which is good. Um, Other Christians, but also non-Christians. And there was 4 very silly comments. And one of them was just lies, 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 lies. And then another one where a comment I made, it all points to Jesus, said, it all points to Frosty the Snowman. And then another comment that says, when are you people going to wake up and stop believing in fairies? I can't remember what the fourth one was, but they're along those lines. And you can't respond to any of those because the people that write them have no idea, because they think they sound smart, but how foolish they sound. They don't they don't pick something in there of all this evidence we presented. They don't pick, so this is wrong for this reason, or you can't prove this, or because it's overwhelming. It's evidence based. So they can just be like a little child. Put lies, 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 lies. Show me the lie. Show me what you're talking about. So it's useless to do it because I said throughout the series, the seed of Satan, spiritually blind, heart against the fulfillment of the covenant, especially towards Christ. And why? Because what does Satan know that when the covenant's fulfilled, he's destroyed? What does his seed think about the covenant being fulfilled? They don't want there to be any such thing as a covenant. They don't want there to be any such seed as that there's such truth as that they're the seed of Satan. They just want to sound superior, blah blah, and nonsense. Because as soon as you start to see, and it actually, and the Spirit starts working in you, and the Lord starts showing you that your unworthiness and His beauty, Satan tries to snatch that away before it sets in. Because if it can just set in, you're the Lord's forever. I want that. And He wants me experience. If you don't have it, then it's like Jesus talked about the seed being spread on different hearts and different territory. It gets washed away. And you get responses like that where we have, and I'm so grateful for I mean, we had so many good comments and likes and everything else. And only four of these ones you can't even respond to because they're so silly. You never even, you could start saying something and say, well, show me my error or whatever, and it'd just be the same thing. No, 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 because it's babble. There's nothing. There's nothing. So yeah, that was on my mind a little bit, and then I had some real challenges this week, and so I went to bed on Wednesday, and I can just tell you the same thing that Paul described, where I was asleep, but I was awake, sort of thing. I don't have no idea. But all I saw for about 3 hours was a word, uh, but the one letter at a time. It was very strange because the first letter I saw, it wasn't in the right order. It kind of worked its way back in the right order later on. But the first letter was an O, and I was looking straight at it. It was so beautiful. It was pure white, and it looked huge. Like it looked like it was a mile big, sort of thing. But then it kind of rotated, and it was thin as a paper. It was like just so thin you couldn't even believe it. But it was really hammered gold that was like transparent because it was made like a mile big from so. But it was so beautiful, and I knew as the different letters started coming in together, eventually the word that spelled out was covenant. But I knew I was not even worthy to be looking at it, and I didn't look up any of this first or just predetermine what I was even going to talk about this out. But I can just tell you that I was like all the things I did wrong, even up even this week, never mind my whole life, just started flooding into me. I felt so ashamed. And I honestly, and I didn't see Jesus or anything. I just saw the letters, and we've been so tied up with jots and tittles and every letter and all this stuff. But I just realized I'm not even worthy to look at this. Never mind speak about this stuff, right? And um, and it really was. It was like trying to change channels. I was trying to wake up. I was trying not to look at it. It was like, okay, I get it. I don't need to see anymore. No, it kept going on. The next letter, the next, then. But what happened was incredible because after seeing it all, after I actually saw the whole word, then everything changed. I went from this feeling of horrific shame and fear to such peace and excitement. I realized it was about the covenant. It wasn't about me. It was about the covenant and how fortunate I was to be knowing how unworthy I was, but to be part of this ministry to be able to speak about it. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it really changed the way I thought about how fortunate we are, all of us, to be living at this time and to be able to see these things that people have not seen before, and then to be able to digest them and to be able to share them. And then it's all about the Lord, and it's all so it doesn't matter if you just feel sorry if someone's like lies, whatever, because they they haven't allowed it to sink in. You know, one of the two things, how beautiful the Lord is, and two, how undeserving we are to even speak about him. But it's him that seeks out the relationship with us, and how beautiful that is. And that's what the covenant is. The covenant is the stronger will help the weaker. And the covenant is, once you're strengthened to fulfill start fulfilling your end of the bargain. And like Paul, once he was strengthened, even in his infirmities, even being buffeted continually by Satan's seed, even having poor vision and having to write in his own hand or have someone help him write or whatever, he was potentially the most effective apostle of them all. And he was an apostle means direct representative of Jesus. Jesus lived through him because he emptied himself and wanted Jesus to live through him. So it's because of that vision, because of seeing the beauty of third heaven and not ever wanting to depart there. I mean, he even says at one point in one of his epistles that he knows his end is coming soon, but he almost rather than it did because he'd be immediately with Christ. So he didn't advocate that he wanted to die, but he said he's not really perplexed because the alternative is actually to him a better outcome, that he would see Jesus sooner. But he wanted to make sure that whatever work that he was sent to do, that he finished. So anyway, that's when we turn the whole thing around. What is the purpose of the covenant? All these things we've been studying and seen as perfection of all these things, is to digest it and to share it, and not in a. And that's why people wonder, well, why am I so um, fixated on maintaining the rights and not letting those go out? Because I don't want the story told in some other way, because it all points to Jesus, and it all and you have to be able to kind of take step by step by step and go at the pace of the slowest. And I've got so many charts and things in there to help understand so that people can do it on their own. But um, anyway, so let's keep in mind that anything to do with the covenant, we're really walking on holy ground, and we shouldn't be afraid to be excited when we see something we haven't seen before, or we're made aware of some deeper, like just another layer of the beauty of Jesus, and the honor that we have today, not just in the covenant code, in anything like Keith's um, presentation today, all the different presenters, different things that are all related to the times we're living in now and what we need to do. But we're all speaking for the Lord, and that's where our joy is from. And we do it with, and that's what kept Paul humble. I mean, and that's what he spoke about in chapter 12, is that these things, these infirmities, these attacks all the time kept him humble. So he didn't have to go out there and boast about having these visions that no one else had or any of that sort of stuff. His boasts were in how the Lord strengthened him, how the Lord made him who he was, and that's all that he cared about.
Just wanted to share something I kind of laugh about inside. I have a couple of people that I've known for a long, long time. They are not Christian at all. And the only time I've ever heard you're a lousy Christian has been from people who are not Christian at all. So inside, I kind of laugh because they wouldn't even know what being a Christian is.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's we had a good pastor, a lay pastor. And but he just knew how to cut to the chase, and people would say, yeah, you're all a bunch of hypocrites and whatever. And you could just say, yeah, the plenty of room in the ark. Come on in and join us. In other words, so are you, but at least we're in the ark.
Right. Well, it's sad because those comments you're talking about, there are some of them that are so vicious. And I mean, I've even commented, have you even listened, before you jump and say something? Because they're going on comments and saying things. It's like, you have no clue what he's even saying. It's just the title. So they're like, oh, you don't know that and you can't. And I'm like, did you bother to listen to it and find out? And then you can say something. But I don't know. That we are very blessed. I am nobody, but I'm so glad that I was able and am able to keep my dad's ministry going. He would be happy if he were alive. Everybody that speaks here is saying things we all need to know and share. And this information that you have been blessed with, Brent, is just really, really from God. And just to know all that and just be able to, it makes the Bible real. It makes our time real. It shows that we are towards the end. And to me, it's very exciting and very, very good. But everything everybody says, just every week is just like, wow, yep.
Well, that's the thing, is that um, we're supposed to, I mean, sometimes we get so reserved that we forget how to rejoice in the Lord. We forget, and we can, and, Peter is such a good example because he goes both ways. I mean, sometimes overzealous, but at least he's consistent. At least he's the first to jump in the water or do whatever. But also, the reason was why God did it, Jesus did the way he did, which always, because it did the same thing to me, is that Peter couldn't even admit that he loved Jesus with that same type of love, that agape love. And he said, and he even said to the Lord, well, Lord, but do you love me, Peter? And then he asked me, do you love me? You know, and but he wanted to show Peter something that Peter didn't really know. And that the answer was, yes, I love you with all my heart, with that agape love. And I want you to keep my sheep. And Peter was feeling so remorseful for denying Jesus. I mean, when he jumped out of that boat and swam to shore to have the Lord comfort him and say, look, do you love me? He couldn't answer the question. He was so ashamed, Well, if I loved him, why would I deny him? And so for us, it's the same thing. And I sometimes, because I'm so ashamed of things or whatever in the past or whatever, I think I can't love Jesus because if I did, I never would have said that or done this or whatever. And I'm reminded by things like, this ministry or whatever that is so important, that I do love him. I love him with all my heart. And so then you start to go, okay, stay humble, and you just, I'm open to teaching. Every time I prepare, I pray and I study, even if it's something I already wrote, I study it all over again because I want to be taught, and and that's why I appreciate this ministry. And from the beginning, talking to your father, saying, I had a dream as a little ministry. I don't want to be part of a big ministry. It was a little ministry, and in the end times, it grew to be a big light. And him and I had such a good talk. For 2 days there, you were there. And I was talking back and forth with him and talking over the phone with him. When you were there, I sent my first writing note, and he read it and gave it to you, and then he had the courage to say, "Yeah, come on down." And but it was the only one I felt comfortable with, and anyway, the long short of it is just like Paul said, no one would have known about that vision that Paul saw had they not criticized him and tried to shame him and tried to do whatever and he never mentioned it again. He just said, look, you want to talk about revelation? I have some things that, that I could say that nobody could boast about, but I don't because I don't want to be set apart that way. You know, you're, but this little ministry has survived a lot already, and Keith was just talking this morning about changes, and he's mentioned two things actually that are related. One was the Pope, and two was Trump, and how the last meeting of the Pope's life is with a representative of Trump, because those are the two things that are going to most affect the end times, is the papacy and the world reaction to the U.S. and vice versa. And so, we really do need each other. And we've got Hein over in Africa. We got people, we got that satellite going in Africa that's really, you know, uh, uh, being heard over there. We got people over there praying. We got, if we're blessed and we could get a satellite for North America and for Europe or into Asia, that's when we'll really be able to speak to the whole world. One of these little Sabbath meetings, and this doesn't take a lot. It takes donations and it takes support, but not a lot really when you compare to the value. And of course, when you do that, you get more people donating from those sources too, but you're bringing it out to a much bigger audience. But thank God we have a chance to prepare amongst ourselves, and I don't want to put people on the spot or whatever, but I can see people getting better at presenting, you know, with each time. I mean, I look at like John and then his first presentations; those are really good for the first ones. Chris, he does a great job every time. But even the more experienced speakers, like Melissa, Keith, Hein, they keep getting better. I don't mean them as people. I just mean the topics and the presentation just keep getting more and more aligned, I think, and more, sort of more encouraging and but also keeping you aware, keeping you of things that like I don't know what's happening in Africa. I don't live there. Hein does, you know. Keith has a lot of long-term relationships with a lot of historic things like you talked about today that I didn't know anything about. So anyway, it's just all the way it should be in my mind anyway.
Yep. And the more we get on different places, the more we're going to find people that we may never even hear from or know, but the more people are going to find it and say, wow, I didn't know that. Where have
Yeah.
you guys been? Because they've already done that. And then we had to stop some. Why? I
Yeah.
don't know. But we did. And now we're, hopefully going to be going on more and more in places we've never been and find different ways to spread it. And I just know there's a lot of people out there that are going to be very happy to see it, both Sabbath keepers and non, and
Yeah.
all the turmoil and all the stuff in the world. It just makes them have faith and hope there is something coming and he didn't forget us.
Yeah. Exactly. And as far as those comments go, I would just delete them. I mean, not that you have to worry about them, but because it's
The nasty ones I do. Some of them are just kind of question and I make a comment, but the nasty ones, I'm just like, there's no reason to have that.
Well, some people feel so bad about
it's
themselves, and the way they feel better about themselves is they try to bring you down to their level.
Right.
And
But
that's why a lot of bullying goes on in schools. I tell my Brex, I've told him that a lot of times that when someone comes and bullies, what they're trying to do is raise themselves up to your level.
right.
Fortunately, if the wrong person comes and sees that, they'll be like, oh, I don't want to
Yeah.
bother. They're
Yeah.
weird or
Yeah.
it's like, no,
You always want questions and comments to keep you honest and to refine your presentation. You want to, and I love answering questions, and you know that I answer all the time. That's why I go back. I only go back but a week or two because keep going back. But if any comments that are there, I'll comment back or say something. But it's
Right.
ones where they just say something like lies, lies, lies. Lies. It doesn't affect me one bit, but I don't.
One of them was you don't have any idea about 27 and nobody knows, and so I'm like, if you listen, that's not what he said. So people just need to listen and, but there are good ones that will find it
Ability.
and out of curiosity listen and be like, wow, wait, I've had people tell me they caught on to something and then they'll just like, wow. They'll hear my dad out of nowhere and they'll hear something about, they don't know him, but they'll hear something about Mrs. White or something. And they're like, oh, who is this? Or they'll, something piques their
Yeah.
interest. And then they start
Well,
watching more and we
the
don't
cool
hear
thing
from them.
is, from the Passover unleavened bread week, there we know for sure that we within the normal group because of those comments, which is good. I mean, somebody actually sat through hours of listening to them so they can make their little comments, right? But it's so, and you never know when the seed is planted. Someone could be making that comment, but it's because it bothered them. What was said bothered them, and maybe they'll keep bothering them until the point where they want to listen some more, whatever. So I'm just saying for the people that the supporters and things like that, not necessary for them to read, that type of comments or those type of things because we don't want to discourage their faith. This should be, to me, it's a private site. You have very hardly any place in the world that's your sanctuary anymore. That's your special place you can go and you can study in peace and you can express yourself in peace and because then it intimidates other people from like someone else who wants to comment or say something because they think, okay, all these people are watching and they don't believe. And so I would just treat it like a BE sanctuary, and if it's inappropriate, just it's out of there, If it doesn't have to mean it agrees with everything, but just if it's silly or if it's inappropriate or discouraging, just doesn't belong in the sanctuary. Sorry.
Right. I
So
agree.
Hello,
Thank
hello. Can I say something?
no,
you.
yes, Mark, of
Oh,
course
yeah,
you can.
hi. Yeah,
All right.
hi. Hello. So first of all, Shabbat Shalom. This is your Jewish friend Mark here in Baltimore, Maryland. First of all, I really appreciate your presentation. I appreciate all the presenters, especially since I hope everyone had a very nice Passover holiday. It was a very meaningful week last week. On those days, I was able to listen to some or the entire 2 or 3 hours per day on some of the days
Wow.
last week. So I really appreciate that.
Wow.
On that. The one thing I will ask for you to feel is a prayers this coming Monday, because it's a very special day for me. Now, what am I talking about? This coming Monday, April 28th, happens to be my birthday. And it's not just any birthday. I'm turning, Lord willing, on this coming Monday, 65, which would make me eligible for Medicare. And not being too funny on that part. But I ask for your prayers and for guidance for the power to work of the Holy Spirit, because the Lord is using me in a mighty way, or hopefully within the Jewish community, which is very important in these last days. And so I ask for your prayers. I'm just happy to mention age. I'm not afraid of saying that. I'm not like some people say I'm always 39 every year. That's not true. The Lord, if He gives life, He takes it away and all that, has blessed me for another year. Please Hashem. And so I ask for your prayers on that. Happy to share that good news. So I just want to leave that with you all on that good note.
Well,
Happy birthday.
Yom
Another-
Haledet Sameach.
It's not old, Mark. Don't say it's old
Okay.
because it makes me really old. So let's not do that.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
that's
but anyway,
young
that's why I'll
compared to
let you
some
know
of the rest of us.
Yeah,
Right,
Mark.
but I just want to let you know the good news, simple and all. Thank you. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, my birthday is today, so happy birthday Monday.
Oh, all right. Well, Mazel Tov to you on your birthday.
Happy birthday, Keith. So Mark, you're when you're watching live, whenever you come on, you're the only one.
I'm not watching live. I call in on the phone. I don't have a TV. I don't have.
What I'm saying is, while we're watching live, while we're watching on Zoom, when you call in, you're the only one that the green little icon of a green phone comes on. So we always know it's you. We always know it's Mark or Baltimore because you're the only
Oh,
one
okay. Thank
that
you.
has that icon. So just so you know, when I was joking around or whatever, I was saying, no or whatever, we know it's you and we appreciate you calling in, but we're
Thank you
all
very much, Baruch Hashem.
yeah, we're all
I-
very familiar. As soon as we see the little green phone coming on, we know Mark's calling in.
uh,
Thank you.
Yellow, yours is green, and I change your name as I see you come on, so people see Mark Hart. Mark Hart from Baltimore, but that's long. We're glad to have you
Okay,
here,
but
Mark.
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.